Today we're checking out Pokemon Hollow Woods, a fan game that is set in the new Oblor region, which is split between two factions. One of these is trying to maintain the region as it is with all of its glory and regional Pokemon, while the other is thinking of the future to try and put the Oblor region on the map, with imported goods and Pokemon that are changing the region, and a lot of people are not fond of this change. Speaking of regional Pokemon, there is going to be 57 new forms and also new megas that will make your jaw hit the floor. There is tons more to talk about with this game, but I would like you to experience it together with me as we jump into all the mysteries that the Oblor region has to offer us. And the first thing we see is that there is a ton of game mode options, giving you an opportunity to play on Nuzlocke mode with level caps, but also a no-grind auto heal and randomizer mode. Auto heal basically heals you after every battle so you never ever have to go to a Pokemon Center again, and no grind mode gives you unlimited rare candies. So if you like a smooth experience in your Pokemon games, we're already off to a good start. After picking your settings, you have to register with the Pokemon League by picking your gender. After a couple days then go by, the trainer card arrives in your mailbox, and episode 1, Beginnings, starts. By looking at an actual news report about the Senator Mara of the Lavender faction. She helps to make the region's laws and runs her own local Senate office and Pokemon gym. And her biggest goal is increasing the trade between the Oblor region and every other region in the world. Unfortunately, because of this, a lot of people are saying that the native Pokemon species here are crowding out. What's pretty cool, however, is that Mara is actually our mother, and she calls us downstairs to talk about her public image, which she always wants to hold up high. And because we're starting our Pokemon journey today, we're actually going to get her some good publicity, as me, her child, is going to be helping her out with the native species program. But before we can do that, we have to pick a Pokemon from the box that she has laid up on the table here, so we can make it to Professor Larch in Falumber Town. We get a choice between a water-type Cloud, Cottony, a Remoraid that looks like a flamethrower, and a grass-type Vulpix with some bushes on its body. I of course went with the flamethrower so I can burn down the competition, and my mom also ends up giving me a package which we have to deliver to the professor. We also get our running shoes so we can zoom across the map, but when we head outside, the first thing I do is talk to some of the townspeople. And I immediately realized that a lot of them give you side quests, from delivering a love letter to searching for books among all of the bookshelves in the region. You can keep track of them in your quest log, and once you complete one, you get some rewards. But before we get into that, thanks to Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video, and also a special thanks to Universal Studios Licensing. I personally like playing Raid because there's never nothing to do. They always keep adding new content, which keeps you engaged, like the campaign, dungeons, limited content, and by far one of the most advanced PvE modes the world has ever seen. I also like that I can play it on my PC to get out those AAA graphics even more, but I can also play it on the go with my phone, which gives me easy access to any partnerships Raid might be doing, like this one with Universal Products and Experiences and Mattel, which is going to bring He-Man and Skeletor into the game as legendary champions. And I guess I'll be able to live through those nostalgic childhood fantasies again, starting from November 5th until December 25th. Because that's when I and all of you people can get your hands on both champions, including one for free via a 14-day loyalty program. And if you don't know who He-Man is, he's basically this big mighty warrior enhancing his own attacks before destroying any evil that stands before him. And Skeletor is this nefarious trickster that extends debuffs that can seal enemies into stone and reduce their turn meter. You can get Skeletor for free simply by logging into Raid on 14 days between November 25th and January 8th. You'll get Skeletor on day 7 and extra bonus reward for the remaining 7 days after that. So make sure you at least start by December 25th so you can get all of these awesome goodies. And you can also complete the Champion Pass to get the other legendary champion, He-Man. So if all of this interests you, you better start playing right now by clicking the link in the description or scan my QR code on screen right now. If you decide to do this, you'll be getting some insane bonuses, like a huge starter pack with the epic champion Tagoar from the Orc faction, and if you manage to reach level 15, we'll throw in another Uugo as well. And after you've downloaded it with my promo code, you can also use the additional promo code Monkey King to get the legendary champion Sun Wukong for free. But this promo only lasts until the end of November, so be fast. You can also add me as a friend under the name Zwiggo, or join my clan Zwiggo Swamp so we can battle in the world of Raid together. A huge thank you to Raid for sponsoring this video, and let's get right back into it. I then try to head to round 1, but just before I enter, I run into a red-haired kid that also lives in my town. He seems to be pretty jealous of me that we're the son of the senator and already have a Pokemon and all, and he even starts to accuse me that we think we're better than him. He says this won't be the last we see of him and then walks off. I don't think too much of it and head on to the next round where we find honey hives. But if we want to take honey out of these, we first need to complete a quest for Nod, the beekeeper, who needs some sweet gummies so his comb bee can pollinate more flowers. We accept and head straight to Falumber Town to search for those, but run into Professor Larch instead. She was waiting for me to arrive because there are 2 other trainers waiting for me and that package. And when we head over to them, we see that one of the trainers is the red-haired kid we just met. He's here for his first Pokemon, just like the other girl. They pick the Remoraid and Vulpix I left behind, and we learn that their names are Denton and Hermia. We also learn that the professor is a science advisor to the Pokemon Senate and has been tasked with collecting data on all the regional species that Oblar has to offer. Unfortunately, they seem to be quite rare to find, and that's where we come in. While we're going on our Pokemon journey, we have to find as many of these and collect their data. The professor then heads off to a meeting and tells me to get acquainted with these 2 trainers, and Mara seems to be an immediate fan of my mother, as she's her political idol and even asks me for an autograph. While Denton is pretty grumpy and doesn't think it's fair that we got a head start compared to them. But he tells me we should be on our tippy toes because he's going to be right on our heels this whole time. After this, we part ways and head home so I can see my mother. She's talking to a gentleman named Argus in front of our door, but he seems to be complaining about that the region is changing and that when he was young, Oblar had its own species and plants, and now it's just apricorns from Johto and Meowths from Kanto. The conversation ends with my mother saying that times are changing, while Argus thinks they should change back. Our mom then calls us inside and says that she can't stand that man or any of his cronies from the Crimson faction. She says that he blames the import and everything for the native species to go away, but really he's obsessed with a version of the region that no longer exists. My mother thinks otherwise though. She thinks we can't bring the native species back, but we can bring the Pokemon world together by importing the very best from around the world. And that's why she needs me to go around the region and challenge all the senators to get some publicity for her and her project. We head outside and try to challenge the first gym we see. Unfortunately, this one is led by my mother and she's currently out, so it's not challengeable right now. But we'll definitely be coming back here later. Instead, I head to a local plant shop and buy myself a pot, which will come in handy later. Just as I'm trying to go to the Great Forest, I get stopped by Hermia, who is incredibly excited for her very first battle with me as she throws out her Aeron. We end up burning it and her Vulpix down with some embers from Remoraid, and after the battle, hypes herself up to be brave like my mother and head into the Great Forest to get stronger. On the other side of the forest, me and her end up running into a shady guy. He talks to himself and says that Operation Great Forest is poised to go swimmingly. Once we call him over, he says that he's a member of the Oblar army, but we don't understand because Oblar doesn't have an army. He then says that we're being brainwashed by the current Senate and that they have a grand plan to show them all the error of their ways. And then he straight up attacks us. After a quick fight with his Carvana, he ends up fleeing, and Hermia says that she's going to report this in Whitecrest City, where our first gym challenge will also be located. Hermia is sure the Senate will sort this out right away, but we've got a couple of things to do before we join her. For example, we learn about secret spots, which are kind of like hidden grottos from Pokemon Black and White. You can enter small little dungeons and at the end of it, you'll get to capture a Pokemon. This wasn't all that useful for me except for the Budew we ended up capturing, because you can use the pot from the flower shop on the Budew and it will plop right into it, turning it into a rock poison type. We then reach Whitecrest City and head straight to the fossil lab. Here we talk to a scientist that is all about experimenting on these fossils and turning them into future machines. Kind of like the future Paradox Pokemon from Scarlet and Violet. So he wants me to go around, search for fossils, and bring them back to him. We then check out the rest of the town and see that there's a huge marketplace, but also a Denton that wants to fight me in front of the gym. He has captured a Starly that gets turned into some grilled chicken after I hit it with some flame charges. His starter Cottonee is an easy target for my Buttoo's stun spores and acid sprays, and once Remoraid finishes it off with a bite, Denton is defeated. He then says that he also grew up in Blossomwood Town, but that he stayed inside dreaming of having his own Pokemon, while I get all of the expectations laid on me because I'm the senator's child. Nobody knew who he was, and now that he has his own Pokemon, I'm still somehow outshining him. This makes him very disappointed in himself, and so he ends up leaving. I then go through the gym challenge and talk to the gym leader Tox. He's obsessed with energy drinks and says that
being a senator takes so much energy.
But he's hyped and ready to get this battle started, so let's get to it. He started off with his own plant in a pot, Roselia, and after my Buttoo used a stun spore on it to paralyze it and hit it with all the acid sprays it could, it was time for me to bring out Remoraid, who eats it up with a couple of bites, just like the next Pokemon, Ghastly. I'm left with only a tiny bit of HP going into the last Pokemon, Whirlipede. Luckily, its Venoshock leaves me hanging on with 2 HP, so 2 Flame Charges do the trick and win me the battle. After getting our badge, we tell him about the group calling itself the Oblar Army, and he's going to help us out by bringing it up to the head senator immediately. We head outside and immediately see the head of the senator together with my mom and Argus. She says that this group sympathizes with Argus's ideas, but doesn't have anything to do with him. She says they're going to address this immediately and that we shouldn't jump in ourselves to try and play the hero. While they then go off to their meeting, I end up going back on my adventure, finding trainers with a regional Marill that's just a plain fairy type and is way too cute to even be a real thing, and after this we end up running into a dispute with people from Whitecrest City and Roughewn City, as one supports the Lavender section and the other the Crimson one. They've been fighting across this river for many years now because a bridge is supposed to be built, but it's of no use as only bickering comes from it. There's a sailor here who knows a lot about the conflict and recognizes me as the child of Senator Mara. He's a good friend of my mother's and tells me to come to the port in Whitecrest City so he can bring me to my next destination by boat. And so we start episode 2, The Mysterious Island, where we learn more about the Oblar Army and that both the Lavender and Crimson faction are uniting to bring them down. Once the new ends, we end up at Sharptooth Island, where me and Budju enter a sandcastle building competition and get a 71 out of 100 score. When that's done, we explore the rest of the island and learn that a house is being haunted by something. So we decide to help the woman out by beating up her fridge and trapping it into a teeny tiny ball. We also find a mysterious man who can sense a strong aura from me and says we're going to be meeting again soon. We then decide to leave the town and enter the Rocking Mountains instead, where we traverse some rough terrain to eventually reach the Sharptooth Ruins, a mysterious mystical place where a lot of weird vibes are hanging around. Luckily, it was also filled with trainers that made my Budju evolve into the Roselia that she deserves to be. I also ended up chasing down a shiny Ralts for a side quest and also added this little boy to the team. Just before reaching the end of the ruins, I talk to a runestone that wakes up a very menacing looking regional Pokemon named Spiritomb. This fire-type soul-collecting demon starts attacking me, and we have no choice but to take it out, as some force is preventing me to throw balls at it. Once my Roselia is done defeating it with some power gems, it fades away into the darkness, and the mysterious man from earlier shows up. After telling him our name and what we're doing here, he wants to help out by telling me an old story, as we learned that the Oblar region was founded around the Great Woods, where the people came to know a mysterious Pokemon that was the spirit of this forest. But over time, people began to fight to control this spirit's power, and so it was split across the Oblar region where it corrupted Pokemon and people. After this, the forest grew weak and the people remained divided, and this brings us to the current situation. He believes that the Pokemon we just met was touched by the spirit of the forest. Unfortunately, for now, we don't know much more about it, so we'll have to part ways, but he does give me one last thing to help me out in my gym challenge, and that's the key of the local gym since it's been closed down for many years. With this, we go back to town and enter the gym, just to see an Oblar Army grunt inside. She immediately gives me the Senate badge and tells me to scram, but when we decide to stick around and do some investigation, she says she's going to dispose of me. We end up beating her quite easily and find out that the rest of this gym is being used as a base of operations for the Ooblar army. We fight our way through armies of grunts and eventually reach the basement, where we meet Cornwallis, an elite guard of the army. But he wasn't always like this. Once upon a time, he ran this gym on behalf of the Crimson faction, but once he realized the faction wasn't going anywhere, he decided to join up with these guys, and offered up his gym as a secret base, which now only serves one purpose: recruitment to their cause. And he doesn't want me meddling in all of these affairs, so he ends up trying to take me down. But his team really isn't anything to write home about, as it's filled with ghost types like Sableye, Misdreavus, Ghastly, and Honedge. The first three end up being taken down by power gems from Roselia, while the final blade gets melted down by flame charge from Remoraid. We hand him his defeat and he says that we might have been strong, but we're too late, as they've already laid down their groundwork for their boldest attack yet, an event in the Great Forest that will make the Ooblar army impossible to ignore. He then instant teleports out and leaves behind a Senate blade, which we can use to cut down trees. With this, we can leave the gym and head back to White Crest Town, where we run into Denton again. He's been training incredibly hard and wants to get the upper hand on me by challenging me to a battle, just for my Roselia to one-shot a Starly. My Ralts and Remoraid then take on the incoming Timber with a Psybeam and Flame Charge, while Rotom shocks his final Pokemon Cottony out of the sky. With the battle being over, we see that Denton starts to like me a little bit more, as he sees that my Pokemon are actually having fun while traveling with me. He's sure we'll see each other again, but before that, we have to cut down some trees in the Great Forest, all the while burning down every trainer we see so that our Remoraid can finally evolve into Octillery, a fire dark type that's ready to barge through enemy defenses. While we're here, I would love to know at the end of the video what your favorite regional Pokemon was, because there's still a ton of them coming up, like this electric Onyx that has traded its eyes for a gem and some magnetic powers. Once it's been taken out, however, we do reach Trowbridge Town, where a lady asks me to bring her 5 native species from this part of Ooblar, and then she'll give me a reward. So we better start searching hard. The cave that's supposed to lead us to our next destination is being blocked off by a police officer, so the only way left for us to go is east, where we find Volkner standing in front of a weird electronic cave. He says this cave powers a certain generator, and this is also the cave where you can normally find the electric Onyx we just ran into, but I never ended up completing the quest. We then get led into episode 3, the Factory Town, where we see some reporters interviewing the head senator, my mother, and the professor. They're here because this is the place where all of the products were made by the bustling Roughewn Factory all of those years ago. Now the factory has been shut down, which means there's not a lot of local things being made anymore, and a lot of people are blaming the Lavender faction because of this. That's when my mom sees me and calls me over and tells the reporters that I've just been on Sharptooth Island working to find native species, but instead of telling them about these species, I decide to go on a ramble about the Ooblar army and the Great Forest they're going to attack. My mom doesn't like this at all and seems to swat it away like it's nothing, saying that I've spent a bit too much time in the sun, and says that the Senate has complete control over the Ooblar army and situation, so nobody should be alarmed. The senator jumps in and says that only they can restore Roughewn to its former glory. This hypes up all the people and causes everybody else to leave. After the interview, my mother talks to me and says that we can't have the public worried about things like this, and that their job is just to tell them what they want to hear. For example, that they're sorry that the Roughewn factory got closed down, while in the end, she thought it was a miserable place that got what it deserved. And so she urges us to go east to check it out for ourselves. But I first want to check out what the rest of Roughewn City has to offer me, like the dance class I joined that ended up giving me an expert belt, and the Roughewn warehouse where we ended up finding a Minccino and brought it back to its owner. We also talked to the factory head, who's the wealthiest executive in all of Roughewn, so we tell him to leave some of the townspeople alone because he's trying to get even wealthier by extorting money out of them. And because we're the senator's son, he's going to join my cause and leave all the people alone. After this, I headed over to the abandoned factory where we find Argus, who says that it's a shame that all the workers got discarded and are now without jobs, and that the Lavender section doesn't care about stuff like this. He and his Crimson faction just want to protect this region and its people from change, and that he will anything to prevent this region from being destroyed. He then goes away and we check out the abandoned factory and find one of the Ooblar army's grunts. They're carrying a suspicious package, so we beat them up and take it from them, which causes our Ralts to evolve into a Curlia so we can safely escort it to the police officer that's standing in front of the cave. We hand this package to him and he says that this individual has probably been trying to build something dangerous. Because of this, he's going to bring it back to his supervisors immediately, giving us safe passage. And so into the Smuggler's Pass we go, one of the most dangerous areas in the region, filled with criminals and a harsh snowy environment that will chew you up and spit you out if you're not careful. Inside we find another suspicious package that's supposed to be delivered to Big Tony in Trowbridge Town. After delivering it to him, he is incredibly thankful and even gives me a Mega Sablenite as a reward. Not that we're going to use that, but we are now officially helping out criminals, and I don't really know how I feel about it. So to clear my head, I check out different rooms of the Smuggler Pass and end up finding the mysterious man who helped us out before. He uses his piloswine to freeze over a body of water so we can safely get over it. This finally gets us outside to Route 4, where we find a skitty that wants to ice skate with us. After doing a couple of loops, it runs off and we carry on to reach Frostington City. Here we find Hermia preparing herself to take on the next gym, who's being led by the famous Senator Aspen. And she's not going to take him on yet. First, she needs to see if she can beat me. Her newly acquired Lopunny starts off by ice punching my Roselia and freezing me. I unfortunately never thaw out, so eventually I have to go into Octillery once I'm dead. I use a flamethrower and a flame charge to take it down, and the next Pokemon, the regional Munchlax, that's part Ghost type, gets eaten up by a bite. I wonder if he turned Ghost type because he actually ate too much himself. The last two Pokemon, Lairon and Ninetales, both get defeated by flamethrowers as well, and with another awesome win under our belt, we start explaining to Hermia that we just saw our mother. She's surprised to hear that the Senate isn't really doing anything to solve the problem with the army, but then hypes the Senate up by saying that their plan is probably secret, which could be the only explanation because they promised us they would stop the Ogler army. I'm not so sure myself, but we're not going to bring her down even more. We instead should do some ice puzzles and uncover that this next Senate member is actually the mysterious man who's been helping us out. His name is Aspen and he's the longest serving senator and the only one not affiliated with either of the two factions. But before we start discussing all of the politics, it's time for us to test him in a battle. His first Pokemon, an Alolan Vulpix, gets immediately killed by Power Gem. After this, we get to see an Oblarian Drillbur, which has turned into an Ice type. Its claws get melted down by another Flamethrower, while Roselia takes out the incoming Frostlass and does major damage against Celio after that. One more Electro Ball from Rotom does the trick, while Octillery can hit a Flamethrower on the final Galarian Darmanitan, which wins me the battle and grants me my third gym badge. Aspen then tells me that he's going to totally trust me because of what we've done on Sharptooth Island. But before he can start, Hermia walks in and we tell him that she's also a very trustworthy person. He then gives out his thoughts on the entire situation, saying that he fears that the Obler region is in very grave danger, but can't put his finger on what is going to happen. But he has always remained neutral so he can try to keep the peace between all of the other factions. But he lately sees that keeping the peace is not sufficient to attain justice, as he sometimes needs to guide people to do the right thing like he did with me on Sharptooth Island. And so the next course of action he wants us to do is meet him in Stalacturn City. This makes Hermia incredibly hyped because she gets to work for a senator, so she doesn't stand around and goes on her way instantly. But we have a couple of things to do first, like checking out the local bakery where we get some sweets and mints to change our Pokemon's nature. I also hear from a local Pokemon Ranger that there's a Sneasel missing somewhere near Route 5 and they need me to go and rescue it. I immediately started looking for clues, which led me to Arctis Shell Cave, where inside we didn't only find the Sneasel but also the regional form of Drillbur, so we capture that immediately and add it to our team. At the end of this cave, we then save the Sneasel from a Piloswine attack and safely bring it back to the Rangers. My newly acquired Drillbur then evolves into Excadrill, and this thing looks absolutely amazing. An Ice Steel type with claws that can probably claw themselves through avalanches. And on top of that, he looks like a knight in shining armor that's ready to save anybody. And personally, I'm just glad to have him on my side. With this new evolution, I headed back to the Great Forest and started picking some mushrooms until one of them came alive and turned into a regional form of Shroomish, a little grass psychic type that slotted into the team perfectly as well. With these two team members acquired, it was time to get some more. So I smashed some rocks with the Senate Hammer and reached the ancient tunnel where we meet the first gym leader of the Sinnoh region, Rourke, who is doing some excavating here. He wants to give me something, but first we need to beat him in a battle. He only has 3 Pokemon, a Graveler, Shieldon, and Rampardos, and with some energy balls from Octillery and Dix from Excadrill, they're defeated quite easily. As a reward, we then get the Explorer Kit, which lets us find fossils. So we start digging up everything we can find and add the fossils to our bag because we have a quest that we need to complete with them. But first we head to Secret Cove, where we help out a regional form of Whalmer by pushing him back into the water. A local fisherman saw this and gave me a good rod as a reward. We can then use this rod to fish up our own Whalmer and add it to the team as our water dark type. And I very much enjoy how this thick boy has been turned into a form of Orca, which are my favorite animal that lives in the sea. We then evolve our Shroomish into Breloom, who seems to have a Parasect on top of its head, which is giving it all of these psychedelic powers. So now it's no longer fighting with its fist, but with his mind. But there was another great mind that needed my help. The scientist at the Fossil Revival Center. He required 2 of my fossils, the Cover and Plume ones, and he turned them into 2 of my favorite Pokemon this game has to offer. The Proto-Turtle Tortuga and the mechanical first bird Pokemon Arcan. I'm normally not a big fan of the futuristic Pokemon, but these 2 are done incredibly well. And believe me when I say they only get better when they evolve. Unfortunately, we can't do that yet because we need to get another gym badge. So we go through the Smuggler's Pass again, where we beat up a ton of trainers that belong to the Magmar gang. They left behind secret notes that can be deciphered to open up special chests where they hide their loot. Once we're done grabbing everything they have to offer, we end up in Stalacturn Town, which seems to be very empty until we enter a cave. This triggers Episode 4, Tales from the Past. From another TV program, we learn that our mother has not changed her ways at all and is still discarding the Oblar army as nothing. However, it's time for us to find out more about this cave we just entered. It's actually the town we're supposed to be in, and it's full of crystals that are being raided by Sableyes. A very cute and cool detail because Sableyes are all about shiny things. Besides this, there was also a house with a woman in it named the Dreamer. She and her Alakazam can take you into Pokemon's dreams. But the one I got sent into was pretty weird, a total maze that eventually led me to a confrontation with Groudon. Once defeated, we get transported back to the regular world and we have unlocked the ability to change our Pokemon's actual ability to their Dream World ability, a tool that's going to be incredibly helpful to us. But that's not why we were called here. We have to meet up with Hermia and Aspen, who are standing in front of a ceremonial place where the people of Oblar gathered in the midst of war. They didn't come here to fight, however. Instead, they painted something among the wall in front of us. A diagram with at the center of it a Pokemon, and at the edges warring people. So Aspen thinks this Pokemon came out of a gem and somehow ended the war all of those years ago. And Aspen thinks this Pokemon could bring the entire region back together to save everybody not only from the Oblar army, but also from themselves. So now Aspen wants us to learn more about this stone and the Pokemon that got summoned from it. And the only clue we currently have is to start going west into the desert to see if there's anything there. So Hermia gives me a pair of Go Goggles and we go on our merry way. But before reaching the desert, Denton ends up running into me. He was also on his way to the desert, but now he might as well see how strong we've become. He starts off with his Staravia, who gets buried under an avalanche from my Excadrill. Breloom then uses Confusion to take on the incoming Girder, while his own regional Whalmer overpowers me. I retaliate with my own Whalmer, but his newly evolved Whimsicott, who's just a bigger clown and a water fairy type now, ends up being a little bit too much to handle for my round boy. Luckily, we still have Octillery in the back who finishes it off with an energy ball, and Denton starts to take his loss pretty well this time, saying that he is angry at the Senate and their allies because they get handed whatever they want, while meanwhile the rest of us people and Pokemon alike have to suffer. But he sees that we're not like that. It's not because we're related to our mother that we're the same. He sees and knows that we care about making things better, and that's why he thinks that we could be friends. That's when Hermia arrives and she says that
Denton, shouldn't you be brooding in a corner somewhere?
To which Denton answers that he's not like that anymore. He wants to get strong so he can work to make Oblar better like me. That makes her incredibly happy, and just before she explains our plan, we hear a loud scream coming from the desert. A scientist then barges in screaming that the Oblar army has taken over the research stations in the desert, and since nobody else is around to help, we're going to have to drive them out. Unfortunately, the door of the research station is locked, so we have to go through the desert and find all the grunts that are stationed in the nearby tents and take all of them down one by one until they drop the cart key. This lets us get inside where we can confront Theodora, another one of the elite guard. She knows we wiped out their colleagues at Sharptooth Island and knows we have to go down, so she doesn't waste any time and throws out her spiritomb at me. And it immediately kills itself with Memento. Nice. The rest of her team was incredibly weak, so Octillery flamethrowered all of them, and we get to see Archon's evolution into Archeops, which is my personal favorite Pokemon here. Theodora then explains that they need attention. They don't want to blow up the forest, but it's what they have to do in order to be seen. And now that we've listened to her ramble on, she says her colleagues are on the way to take me out. Luckily for me, Hermia and Denton heard everything and barged through the door to help me. They say the Senate is on their way to arrest them, which means it's time for Theodora to make her exit as she somehow instant transitions out of there. This leaves only the three of us standing, and when Senator Kai finally arrives, she immediately thinks Denton is the one behind all of these attacks. We try to explain to her that he was trying to help us take down the evil army, but she isn't having any of it as my mother vouched for me and Hermia personally, but not for Denton. So she takes him away. Hermia's faith in the Senate then starts dwindling more and more, but somehow she still believes in them and says that they've probably just made a mistake and they're going to sort it out right away. So I'm going to go to Senator Kai to try and clear this up while Hermia goes back to Falumber to talk to my mother. So we head over to Dunevale City, which definitely has an Egyptian vibe linked to it, but we're not here to do any sightseeing as I head straight to the gym where my future Tortuga evolves into Caracosta. He and his metal shell are ready to break this gym leader apart, but not before we get through all of the puzzles that required all of my brain power to complete. This eventually leads us to Kai, who knows we're here to talk about what happened in the desert, but she first wants a battle to lighten the mood a bit. So let's give her one she won't forget. For a gym leader in the desert, she surprisingly uses water-type Pokemon, as her Horsey gets taken out by a single energy ball. Her next Pokemon, Sharpedo, just takes a couple of rock slides from Jet Turtle to get sent back to the sea where he belongs. Archeops and Excadrill's power combined can take out her Whimsicott, while Breloom can spam Leech Seed, Stun Spore, and Mega Drain on Milotic to come out on top as well. A few more confusions later, and the next Pokemon, Tentacruel, also bites the dust, and her final Pokemon, Caracosta, gets taken out by my Arcanius's Dark Pulses. This gives us our 4th gym badge, but that's not why we're really here. We need to talk business. We relay the entire situation to her, but she just says that she can't really do much about it. You see, the Crimson faction just made their first arrest of the Oblar army, and if she were to release that prisoner straight away, well, it just wouldn't look good for their publicity. So she tells me to go to my mom instead, who will probably sort this whole mess out for us. So we have no choice but to head back to the place where it all began, my hometown. On our way over there, Wailmer evolves into Wailord and grows even bigger in size, but not as big as a disappointment on Hermia's face when I tell her the bad news. She's been trying to get to my mom this entire time, but the gym has been blocked off because there's a press conference going on. That's why she needs me here, because we're her son and she's always going to meet with me. So we head inside and go out guns blazing as we take out every journalist we see because they're just trying to ask us questions. In the end, we even have to go through a red carpet and answer their questions, and if we answer wrong, we get sent back to the beginning. I guess that's what they call media training, which is what my mother has been doing to me all this time. But I'm starting to get fed up with her. And when we finally reach her, the only thing she cares about is that I look good for the cameras, telling me to smile because this is a big day for her. She tells the cameras that the Oblar Gym Challenge is a long and old tradition, that now even her son is here as part of that challenge today. But beyond that, I have also been vital in the force of restoring our native species and countering the threats that face this region. From that, you can see that our family is just like yours. We want the same things, stability and peace. And just like you, we are about to have a Pokemon battle. She then whispers to me,
"Whatever you wanted to say, do it after we battle."
and so we finally get to face our mom. She leads off with a normal type Ambipom that I low sweep with my Snowbur. However, I end up getting burned, and when I'm about to hit my second one, she swaps into her ghost type Snorlax, who gets taken out by a single crunch from Archeops after Excadrill falls. I then use Steel Wing to take out her incoming Ambipom as well, and Staraptor takes a Rock Slide before taking me down with a close combat. Another Rock Slide from Jet Turtle later, and this bird also bites the dust. We also do major damage on the incoming Chinchino and Azumarill with Low Sweep and Aqua Tail, so Octillery can finish them off with Flamethrower just like the last Pokemon Lopunny. This ends our battle, and my mother ceremoniously gives me my 5th gym badge. She ends off her speech by saying to the people at home,
"We are always working to make things better for you."
and as she urges me to smile into the camera one last time, everybody leaves. We then get some alone time with her, and she tells us that this was all a circus to get more votes from the people. But now we can say whatever we like. We tell her everything about Denton and about the army that are going to march on the forest and destroy it. But she and the Lavender section don't really care about them anymore, because the people of the Oblar region associate the army with Argus and his cooperation, which puts the Lavender faction in a really good light. So she tells us not to worry about the Oblar army anymore. If they destroy the forest, so be it. My only job is to find those native species so that she can show that she cares. As for our friend Denton, she's also not going to do anything about that, so I guess we're going to have to make the rest of the region safe ourselves. She does hand me a cruise ticket which can bring me to my next destination. However, that's something we're not going to be finding out just yet, because this is the end of Pokemon Hollow Woods' demo. The game is still going to receive updates in the future, and I cannot wait what the rest of this story is going to bring, because I actually think the narrative is amazing. I know they always say to keep politics out of your favorite games, but I think this game actually did it very well. But let me think what you thought of Pokemon Hollow Woods' first impressions in the comments down below. And with that out of the way, I want to thank my membership and Patreon supporters one last time. You guys really helped me out a ton with your contributions, as it's helped me to improve the video quality by a ton. Thanks to my awesome editor. And I also want to thank the sponsor of today's video, Raid Shadow Legends, once again. You can check them out yourself with the links in the description. And as always, people, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. I'm Zwiggo, and I'll see you all next time.